Areas after the win.
Right, you earlier before the game talked about maintaining spirit, probably being as big as anything for the team. How do you think the team came out, and how do you think that factored into tonight's game?
I mean, I thought our defense at the start of the game was almost as good as it could be. The clear problem was our turnovers, you know, and so like you asked about the start of the game, if you looked at the first half, and if we didn't know the score and you said we have 13 turnovers in a first half, 10 in a second period, in Toronto, in the Eastern Conference semifinals, game 2, what would you guess the score would be? You certainly wouldn't think you were winning, and you bet that they would have 70 because they run so well. And so if you eliminate the turnovers, which they had 18 points off, and you look and say we held them to 38 points, I was proud of our defense, and for those reasons, to your question about how do you think you started with your spirit, I think our spirit was just fine, and it was reflected in a pretty solid defensive first half.
Brett, Kawhi still ended up with 35, but we saw Ben out there denying him possession, even touching the ball in certain possessions. And it seemed to, like, as you mentioned, the first half defensive effort set the tone for the rest of the game. Just how did you like your defensive execution, Ben in particular, and the rest of the team tonight?
Yeah, I mean, you just, especially since it's now in front of my eyes, you know, in real time, as far as Kawhi's brilliance. He's really, really good. We all get that. But when you know, having to scout and game plan, and then it's happening 20 feet from you, it's exacerbated, it's magnified. And, you know, I think Ben did a really good job on him. And we tried to you know, have different looks at times where we double him, we didn't. You know, by and large, it was Ben's assignment, although other people inherited him if we got switched out or Ben was out of the game or whatever. And I thought Ben did a good job. And then to your point, you know, you look down and you say, well, he's got 35. And he's just an incredibly gifted, versatile scorer. Really can score in a bunch of ways.
Right. You chose to go with Greg Monroe first off the bench, and just wondering what you thought about how he did, and also shortening the rotation, I guess, up until he had an ankle thing and had to get out.
And so, you know, when you go in and you look at game 1 and you say, what adjustments can we make? We made multiple adjustments on matchups, 1. We did some different things with Kawhi, 2. And we shortened our sort of rotation by design on purpose, 3. And Greg coming in, you know, was going to be sort of a gut feel that I had. And I thought he was great. I thought our bench with James Ennis and Greg, you know, Tobias got in foul trouble. With 4, Greg had the ankle turn. You know, you had Amir, who we decided to activate kind of, not at the last minute, but when we learned of Joel's news. And so it's a tale of a team win. It really was a contribution from a bunch of different people. And I thought Greg was outstanding.
Brett, can you take us through the thought process in assigning Joel Embiid, your 5, to Pascal Siakam, a very active kind of 3-4 guy, and then trusting Greg Monroe enough to have him be the backup, number 1, and number 2, you know, why Ben generally exclusively, whenever possible, on Kawhi versus Jimmy or Tobias or Ennis?
I mean, so there's sort of 3 parts to that question. First, Joel on Siakam. You know, you have a hunch, you hope it works well. We had a taste of some success with Joe on Giannis in our Milwaukee series. We felt like, you know, there was some similarities there. They started doing different things. You know, I thought they did a really good job. Toronto did a really good job. Coach Nurse did a really good job of moving Siakam around to, like, make that a little bit more of a challenge. I think that Greg coming in, as I said a minute ago, was sort of a gut feel for mobility reasons, and I think he's a ball mover. He ended up scoring probably more than I would have guessed. And Your third part of that question was, yeah, Ben, on Kawhi. Just, like you watch a game in the pre-press conference, on the pre-game press conference, somebody had asked about, like, when do you feel confident that somebody can guard somebody? Like, how long does it take, I think was sort of the question. And I felt, immediately game one, like, okay, I think Ben with his length maybe has the best chance to guard arguably one of the top 3 NBA scorers. And, we got our hands full going back to Philadelphia. We gutted this one out when the ball's rolling around on the floor and they're trying to pick it up like an orange seed, and it ends up in Danny Green's hands for an open 3. We got lucky there at the end. But those 3 things that you spoke of are how we came to that decision.
Speaking of gutting things out, can you talk about Joel Embiid's fortitude tonight, playing the amount of minutes he did, and the effort that it took to stay with a guy like Siakam and help and make a basket in the last minute that iced the game?
I mean, when you go into our locker room before the game and I see Joe, hook up to an IV, and he's got a sort of maybe it was his cell phone or a small iPad, like studying, and he's like looking at him and watching, different reads on Ibaka, and he's got his arm out, and he's prideful. He wants to win. Like he's an incredible teammate. He has been with me the longest, and for him to come out and, we will see he was 2 for 7, which is definitely not Joel. But what I remember is late, about 2 minutes, they double teamed him, and he found the wherewithal to find, Jimmy Butler on the other side of the floor for a huge 3. And then to your point, we're coming down the court, like, do I call a timeout or not? I have 2, and I didn't want to. Like, I felt like I knew I would end up drawing the same play that we could run in flow. And so we stuck with it, and he ended up making that shot. And so full credit all over the place to Joel.
Coach, this is a little bit of an unusual win in that neither team cracked 100 points. You guys shot 40% from the field. Do you see that kind of pace favoring you guys going forward?
Do I see what?
That kind of pace, more of a defensive juggernaut, kind of going forward, favoring you guys?
I don't know if it favors us or not. Like when you shrink your rotations, it's naive for us to think you're going to play the game like a track meet when it's a fist fight. It's a grind the whole game. And so I think that the turnovers still, to me, are the most important offensively. When you ask about like what pace are we going to try to play at, we'll try from time to time to play as fast as we can, but the reality is it's just a grind, and when you shrink your rotation, you're probably not going to be able to call upon that type of freshness as much as if you were playing like a normal 9.5, 10.
Right. When you guys went out and got Jimmy Butler, and I think it was mid-November, you guys made that trade. Is this sort of what you envisioned when you went out and got your third star and a guy who has the reputation as an alpha dog in these sort of situations?
This was James Butler. Like, that was the adult in the gym. And I get as excited as the volume of threes that he sought as much as anything. And he was just a tremendous sort of rock. He willed us to a lot of different situations. And he was a great teammate on the bench. Like even Jonah's three-point shot that he made in the corner, on the way out to the court, coming out of a timeout, he told him, so, young fella, if you're open, you have to shoot it. And ironically, he was open 40 seconds later, and he did, and he made it. So kind of all over the place. He was a stud. He really was an adult in the gym. Thank you.
Brett Brown of the Sixers behind one huge play from Joel Embiid, a lot of help from his friends, or even going home. We've got much more. We'll hit from both sides and break down and show you the highlights when we come back.